for people who have been searching for answers and explanation to why they went through certain things. Yeah. So we have today we have with us Dr. Jamila Koshy, who will be leading us on this session, and how to break free from how to find freedom from painful memories of the past. And Dr. Jamila Koshy is a psychiatrist by profession, and she is somebody who really has a heart to serve people, and she has written several books and also speaks on various forums and various topics that matter to the society today, and for challenges that common people face. So we want to welcome Dr. Jamila Koshi to take us forward in this session. Welcome, Dr. Jamila.
Good evening to all. Thank you, Pastor Abhijit, for giving me this opportunity. Yes, so the topic that we are going to discuss today is how to heal from painful memories of the past. In order to do that, I think we first need to just understand what these memories could be and where they come from. It's only when we do that that we can figure out how to deal with it, right? So that's how I'll be taking it. I'll be talking about the various kinds of memories that are painful, the various areas of our life which might cause us to have these painful memories, and then we can figure out how to deal with it, right? So the first thing that probably is there in all of our lives to some degree or the other, hopefully not to a very severe degree, but everybody has some form of trauma in their lives. Some abuse, some maybe big incident, some small incident of harm done to you, right? So trauma is something which has happened to you or done to you, either by persons or sometimes even sometimes incidents can become traumatic, right? It might not be deliberately done, but certain incidents can cause a great deal of trauma. War, accidents, all these things can be very traumatic memories. So it's done to us. The most hurtful of these probably would be where there is a lot of violence involved, particularly physical violence, sexual violence. All of us have some sort of these memories. It's extremely common, right? They found, for instance, studies have found that child sexual abuse is so common in India that when a large study was done by the Ministry of Women and Child Development, this largest study that was done showed that almost 50% of the children who were in the study had had some form of sexual or physical abuse done to them. And that is scary, isn't it? 1 in 2 children is harboring these memories. And as you shared, sometimes these memories can carry on till our later elder years. We might have these hurtful memories. Okay, that's one kind, and we'll come to that and what should we do about it and stuff like that. But look at the next one, which is mistakes done by us. Now, these can also cause us painful memories. Trauma is what happened to us, whether if we went through some kind of physical abuse or verbal abuse, or if we went through an accident, or if we were in a situation of violence, or all these things could be traumatic. But what about mistakes that we have done? Sometimes we have made the mistake. We cannot blame it on anybody else. It's completely and totally my responsibility for something that I did, which is a painful, hurting memory in the past. That if I had not done this, my whole life may have been different. These are the thoughts that can trouble us late into our lives. Loss can be something which is very painful. Loss of family, loss of dreams, loss can be very painful. These may be one of the kind of memories that remain, which hurt. The pain never quite goes away, particularly if it's the loss of a loved child, if it's the loss of a spouse. These things can linger on for years. Also, loss of dreams. No, we wanted to do something. That hurt can be there forever sometimes. I know one dear friend who always, that painful memory is there in their mind, that I was called to go and do a particular job in the church, right? He felt that he was called as a missionary to the north, but he never went. And that hurt has lingered. He remembers the loss of that dream, that hope, that task that he felt he should be doing. All right. Sometimes it's neither something which was done to us, nor a mistake done by us, not even a loss in those terms. It may be just that the circumstances that we have gone through were very painful. Even if it was not directly affecting us, perhaps we were observers standing by and watching. Perhaps we were just involved in it by mistake because it was the larger group that was involved. But sometimes those memories also can be very painful, particularly for sensitive people. Just watching as an observer itself can cause hurt, which lasts for a long, long time. Okay, let's look at these are just some more thoughts on each of these areas, right? So, trauma, I picked out the picture of the cyclone and the floods and the tsunami. These were these big events that happened, right? The physical event that happened. And these, can you imagine the hurt of the parents who lost all of their children? They lost three of their children in the tsunami. Three children, all lost in that huge giant wave. The cyclone. I know a lady who lost her house. That was her house, her home was her sole comfort after losing her husband and her children migrated abroad. Her house and her home and her garden were her whole life, really. Okay, that was what she poured her energies and her emotions and her love into. And then the floods came in Chennai, and the waters reached up to the second floor. Her house was completely drowned, and everything in the compound was lost. And this lady had to move to another house, and she was actually living close to us. She would go every day to her house, though she could not live in it anymore because she could not even clean it properly, clean the surroundings, nothing. But that hurt remained, and she would go every day to her house to see it, to sort of potter around the garden and try to get things back to normal. So these kind of traumatic events can linger for a long time. It can affect our life completely. Look at the area of mistakes, okay? I want to dwell on this a little more because trauma is something which we often talk about, right? We talk about sexual abuse, we talk about rape, we talk about these unforeseen acts of God, as we talked about. But often we do not talk enough about the mistakes that we have made, which sometimes can be a painful memory. And I want to look at it in two, three ways. Sometimes it's just an incidental, unplanned mistake, right? For instance, uh, you have to go and give an exam, and it's a very important exam. And suppose you just happen to not have filled air in your cycle or scooter. And as you're going, you find that you get a puncture and you cannot go anymore. And you're running around trying to get an auto and you can't. And you find that you have missed the exam, which is perhaps the most important exam to determine your future, right? And you lose a couple of years because of this, and everything goes haywire. And that one mistake was that you did not fill air in your scooter or your car cycle tire. So that can be a very incidental, very unplanned, very strange kind of mistake, right? So these kind of mistakes are quite frequent in our lives, actually, right? We just take the wrong turn. Sometimes we we oversleep and we miss a flight, which is very important, or we just forget to put something in our bag and we lose a phone somewhere, or these unplanned mistakes which somehow have a escalating, cascading effect on our lives because it affects something else and then something else and then something else. And we all know this sort of thing. And you keep thinking, if I had only done that, if I had just said this to that person, maybe they would not have, done that mistake. So these unplanned incidental mistakes can bother us. Sometimes it is poor choices, right? We make friends with the wrong group of people, and they perhaps lead us into a substance use habit. Or we make a poor choice of a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and we find suddenly that maybe we are pregnant. Okay, and then your whole life changes because you do not know what to do or whatever. This poor choice has affected your whole life. Sometimes we might make a deliberate mistake. All right, we know that we shouldn't be choosing this, but we know that this is not the right way to go, but we do it anyway. And afterwards, we end up thinking that, why did I do that? I knew this was not the person I should marry. I had all these warning signs up. The number of people who have told me this, that I could see the warning signs. I saw the red signals. I saw the flags. But I was so much in love that I overlooked that. And I deliberately went ahead knowing that this was a dangerous thing to do. And then you end up perhaps in an abusive situation, in a toxic situation, or you end up in a place you don't want to be, and your whole life changes. So sometimes it's a deliberate mistake. So we need to differentiate here between the mistakes which are sometimes just immaturity, age related. For instance, a young person might, they are giving, maybe they're trying to decide what they should do with their life, right? And because they're very young, they don't make a right choice. They are not able to think it through, or they say that everybody's telling me to take engineering. Yeah, I must listen to them. So then they just take engineering or something like that. And then they find out that they're not suited to engineering at all. They find out that they do not want to spend their life handling machines or in software or whatever. And they say that, look, my heart is actually in history, or I prefer to be working in an NGO, or I prefer to be doing English. And because you are a young, immature person, you have gone into that without thinking too much, without having the ability to say no or whatever. So these age-related problems can happen, and that can happen at different stages of our life, okay? Because we do not know how to deal with certain things. As we said, incidental mistakes can happen at any age of life, and this is very common. This happens more often than we know. Incidental mistakes. I keep thinking of the guy who just was driving down in our hospital, and he just took a left turn without thinking, and he actually knocked down a woman and her son who were walking on the road. And I keep thinking, how did that poor officer, he was a medical officer, he was a doctor, how is this man going to live with this, that I knocked down this woman and her son, and the son suffered a fatal injury and he died. And such an incidental, such an unplanned, such an unnecessary thing to happen, but it was his mistake. He turned without looking. He was perhaps caught up in his own thoughts or whatever. He was not drunk. He was not nothing. He was a good man. Okay. Sometimes genetic tendencies can lead us to make these kind of mistakes. Okay. We need to realize that. Sometimes we have tendencies towards depression, tendency towards different kinds of illnesses. Okay. So that can cause us to make mistakes, sometimes get into substance abuse. So mistakes are an important thing which we should understand. As we said, when we talk about loss, right, we talked about trauma, we talked about mistakes, and we're coming back to the whole issue of loss. Now, loss can be, of sometimes it could be of a person, as I said, and a loss of a person, particularly a child or a spouse, can be very, very uh, consequential. It can affect years and years of your life. It can rob you of happiness for many, many years because you keep thinking about that loss and you keep feeling that perhaps I should have done this or done that. And there are a lot of mixed emotions which come in. There is this numbness. Sometimes you cannot believe that this is happening to me. Sometimes there is a lot of anger. Sometimes it goes into sadness and there's weeping for a long, long, long time. Sometimes there's a lot of guilt that I should have done this or I should have done that, or it's my fault. He was telling me that he was not feeling well. Maybe we should have gone earlier to the doctor, or maybe I should have gone to a better doctor, or whatever it is. And all this kind of complicated emotions can trouble us. And those memories can remain for a long, long time. Particularly if there's been some issue between you all, if you were not very on settled terms with that person, if there was some stress and strain in the recent past, the grief can be even more prolonged and complicated because guilt gets mixed up and regrets get mixed up. And then, as I said, dreams and hopes, the loss of that can also be a painful memory. I always wanted to be an architect. and I was not given the chance to do it. I was not able to study. I was not able to get it. Why did God allow me to do that? That memory can hurt. Sometimes it could be that I always wanted to wait for my girlfriend to marry her, but then I didn't have a job and she went ahead and married someone else. If only I had got a job sooner, perhaps I would have married her and I would have been happy. And that painful memory is neglect. Sometimes it could be the loss of your home, right? You take some bad decisions, perhaps you get into gambling and you lose your home, you lose your house, or you lose a job, and the loss hurts, the loss pains. Perhaps you have not, uh, you know, dealt satisfactorily with the property issues in the family, and you did not manage the property properly, whatever it is, and you keep feeling that loss, that I made that mistake, I lost us that property, or I lost us this or that, or whatever, I could have done this better. So these kind of loss related memories can be very troublesome. Finally, the last again, which is circumstances. Sometimes it's not the trauma done to us, it's not a mistake done by us, it's not even a loss, but it's just that circumstances in the family, with our children, with perhaps some friends, or in our workplace quite commonly, or perhaps even in our religious institutions, in our churches, some problem which is hurtful. Like, why did I have to go through this? Why did my family have to have that problem? Perhaps some member of the family did not take care of the grandparents. Perhaps there was some bitterness between somebody. Perhaps there was a property feud. Perhaps there was somebody who cheated on somebody and it became known in the family. And it became a shame that how our family had to deal with this, that there was this messy scandal in the family. Or perhaps somebody did not look after a relative. Whatever it is, these hurts can hurt. Sometimes we can bear that grudge in our heart that that person did this, or that person was responsible for bringing shame to us. Sometimes it's our own children. We see them and we regret that I didn't do this or I didn't do that. How did our children become like this? Perhaps they shouldn't have married so and so. Why did they move away from our country? Why did they go abroad and leave us here? Whatever it is, there's something perhaps not directly done to you, but that circumstance can give you a very painful memory. Sometimes friends have betrayed us, right? We think of certain issues with our friends. This one could have been close to me. Perhaps I should have, spent more time with this one. Or perhaps some friends fought among themselves. We had a good group going, 6 of us close friends. But then somehow the group broke up. Somebody fought with somebody else. And you are left with that feeling that if only we had all clung together, we would have had this solid friendship way into our 60s or 70s or whatever it is. Sometimes workplace issues, right? Some toxic boss troubling everybody, some sexual harassment case in the office, somebody who gossiped and spoiled somebody else's relationship, somebody who did not share information and therefore the project failed or whatever it is. Some workplace issues can cause painful memories. That this is such a bad thing to remember. Sometimes it is churches which can even behave like that. Okay, somebody in the church who is not kind enough, who is not selfless enough, who is not in it for the service or the ministry, but is in it for perhaps the power or whatever it gives them. So all these things can help us to that cause us to have these horrible bad memories. Okay, so what do we do about it? Now, in order to figure out what to do about it, there are two things that we need to do. Okay, if you remember the first picture that I showed you of the floods. Now, I remember when the Chennai floods happened, and where I was caught in that. That's why I keep remembering the Chennai floods. But there are unfortunately nowadays there's floods in every city. So probably all of us, whichever city we are in, can speak to this. When there is a flood in a city, there is a lot of damage that happens to property. There's damage that happens to the roads, to the trees. As you can see, this is the kind of picture that you have in the city then. So there is a lot of initial cleanup which has to be done. And that is usually done. Okay. Every municipal corporation, every family will do the initial cleanup. The trees will be removed, the water will dry up, the mud will be to some extent removed. The cars will be taken for cleaning, right? If the fridge has been spoiled, you will fix a new whatever motor, or so the initial cleanup happens. But what about the deeper cleanup? What about the actual inside issue? What about the storm drains that are filled with mud, right? What about the inner workings of the car which has got spoiled, which might need a complete overhaul? Or if you are cleaning your house, you need to do a very deep clean. Perhaps there's been mud, you need to have some kind of detergent, disinfectant put, or whatever it is. It requires a very deep clean. So similarly with our hurts, we sometimes do the surface cleanup, right? If there's been a death in the family, of course we do all that is required. The funeral is arranged, and all the property matters are dealt with, and the paperwork which has to be done is done. All that, those things are done. But what about the inner healing? What about the hurt inside? If there's some property matters to be settled, yeah, we do all the paperwork. But what about the hurt that you didn't give me my proper share? You tricked me. Those deeper issues are often not handled. So whatever the cause, whether it's a trauma from, a external cause like a earthquake or a tsunami or some sexual harassment or violence, whatever it is, the acute stage can have all these symptoms. Okay, so you can have shock, you can have a panic state, you can have severe anxiety, you can have a lot of distress and agitation, weeping, perhaps not sleeping, perhaps remembering the trauma. Okay, whatever you've gone through, just having vivid pictures of that come back to you, and having palpitations or inability to eat, or just that feeling of fear. These are all the acute issues which happen around these major traumas. If it's a mistake, an accident, trauma, that sort of thing. Loss as well. Grief also can cause these exact same things. If it's a loss of a person, loss of a loved one, it can cause all these kind of symptoms. But what is of more interest to us right now, because we're talking about painful memories, is the deeper, the long-lasting psychological issues. And these are the things that can sometimes happen. We can have a lot of anger. Any of these things can cause anger. Trauma can cause anger. We may be very angry with the person who did it. We may be very angry with God if God allowed it. We may be angry with the authorities for not preventing it. We may be angry at doctors who couldn't save our loved one. We may be angry at somebody else who did not see our pain and come and side with us. So this anger can last for a long time. We may lash out in anger, or we may hide it inside, and it may come up in bitter comments. It may come up in cynicism. It may come up in a lack of closeness and intimacy with that person. So anger can last for a long time. Sometimes we may have a lot of confusion. We may not know how to deal with these things anymore. We may be uncertain. Okay. So if we have lost a loved one, perhaps if you have lost a parent, we're very confused then as to how to go about life. We don't know what is the next step to take. We don't know, okay, I don't have a father or I don't have a mother. How do I deal with this? How do I fill this lacuna in my life? How do I take it from here? Am I going to be a whole person? So that confusion about roles and confusion about who should step in, all these things may happen. Suppose even if it is a case of, say, sexual abuse or some kind of abuse from the past, you may be very confused. Am I supposed to talk about this? Am I supposed to hide it? Am I supposed to protect that person? Am I supposed to meet them normally? Can I tell what they have done to someone else? If the other persons don't believe me, then what do I do? So there is a whole lot of confusion around these issues as well. The painful memories can cause that. It can also cause all these other negative feelings, the feeling of worthlessness. So if I have been abused, or if I have made a very big mistake, right? If I have, lost money for the family, or if I have done some huge mistake on the job or something like that, I can feel very worthless, that I'm useless, I'm a failure. I have no value. That's why this trauma happened to me. You can feel powerless, that I cannot change this. And often people who are abused for a long time have this sense of powerlessness. They do not feel that they can stop it. People will keep on asking them, why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you say no? But that's because psychologically, that feeling of powerlessness and helplessness is so severe that they can't do anything about it. It's a little like an elephant, you know. When an elephant is very small, when it's tied with a chain, the elephant can't break the chain and it submits to it. But later on, when the elephant is huge and big, that little chain cannot actually hold the elephant at all. One little tug and the chain would have broken, but the elephant doesn't do it because it has got used to that. It feels that it is powerless. It does not realize that it has the power to actually completely pull out the chain and go and do whatever it wants. Sometimes trauma from friends or abuse or loss can help make us feel very abandoned, alone. People who have lost relatives or anybody to suicide often feel this way, that you betrayed me and you went, you left me and you went, you sort of rubbed coal in my face and you went. How could you do this to me? That feeling of abandonment and betrayal can cause a very painful memory for a long, long time. Strangely enough, a lot of times there is a feeling of shame and guilt, even if the trauma was done to you. A lot of time it turns inward, and the blame and guilt is felt as if I have done something. And the stigma I myself am putting on myself. And I hate myself for what I had no control over. Okay, so these kind of complicated issues can happen. It can lead to a lack of trust and withdrawal of intimacy from the family members. If it was of one sex, the opposite sex, which did it to me, I hate all members of that sex. I do not want to get intimate. It can cause a lack of confidence and low self-esteem. It can cause depression, anxiety, uh, an inability to then form a healthy relationship later. Sometimes the opposite can happen if there has been sexual abuse. You may become precautious sexually, and that may lead you to further victimization, and the cycle just goes on and on and on. And then academic and interpersonal problems can happen, rebellion, conduct problems. Okay, so all these kind of things can happen if the trauma, if the abuse, if the grief or the loss is not dealt with properly. Okay, so now coming to what we can do to help ourselves to heal. First, we need to understand where it's coming from. Okay, I've spent a lot of time on that because we cannot just jump into healing. We have to understand where the painful memory is coming from. Was it something just done to me? Was it something I did to myself or to someone else? Was it some loss which I suffered? Or was it just contact with painful situations which has made me feel all this pain, these horrible memories? Okay, now we need to remember that healing takes its own time, and different people heal at different rates. And rather than, we cannot very easily fix things. So this kind of picture that you see in the corner here, 5 easy steps to self-healing in 5 minutes. Okay, this is just not possible. Okay, this is a very deceptive kind of thing to write and say. And there's a lot of this pop psychology around, not really very wise. It's not going to happen so quickly. Painful memories are not going to go away in 5 minutes. They will take a lot of time. They will take a lot of effort. But yes, the good news is that it can be healed. It can be helped. Okay, so let's look at some things that we can do in order to help ourselves to heal from trauma. Now, the first thing is to allow the thoughts that we have about the painful memory. Okay, whatever thoughts are around it, it's good for the thoughts as well as the memories to come up. It's good for it to come out. It's good for us to expose it. Often what happens is we keep it hidden away inside, and it doesn't even show itself in its full form. We may have a hazy memory of it, and that hazy pain is there, but we have not allowed it to come fully out. And when I'm talking about this, I always give my own example because it is such a vivid example for me. You know, when I was in the 8th standard, there was an incident of, well, what should I call it? Yeah, sexual abuse or harassment, whatever, sexual, whatever, harassment, which happened to me, which I was only in the 8th standard, and we had gone to a parade ground to watch some, I think, some air show display, something was going on, maybe paratrooping, something. I don't even remember what it was, because that's another thing. When some trauma happens to you, you tend to not remember the details. You only remember the incident, right? All the other memories around it fade. So I cannot remember what it was that we went to the parade ground to see, but I remember what happened. I remember that actually I didn't remember. Okay, this thing incident happened to me, and I forgot about it. I did not allow myself to think about it at all. I suppressed that memory. Actually, the technical term in psychiatry would be I repressed that memory into my subconscious without talking to anybody about it for uh, probably 16 years. Okay. So when I was 30, 16 years later, as a psychiatrist, I was asked to write an article on eve teasing. And as I wrote that article, suddenly this memory came back to me in its full form. And when it came back to me, it came back with all the emotions which I had experienced as that eighth standard child, right? I was how much? Maybe 13, 14 years old. So at that age, whatever I experienced at 13, all those emotions came flooding back. uh, I remembered then that this had happened. That I was in the parade ground, and this guy came up from behind, and he started touching me. All right, and I was scared. I was unsure what was going on, but I didn't know. I didn't. This was the first time this was happening, and I was not at all prepared for it. So I turned around, and I can remember. I remembered that there was this man. I could not remember the face, but I remember a person who, to my 13-year-old eyes, he looked old, and he seemed to be coming very close to me. And I was unsure, but I remembered smiling at him because he was an adult. You are supposed to smile at people, and I smiled at him. But then I suddenly realized that this was not comfortable and right, and I started trying to get away from him. I was hiding from him among the other girls, and this man was following me. And as I remembered the incident, all the emotions that I felt came flooding back: the terror, the uncertainty, the feeling of being, confused as to what is happening. All these emotions came back. And as I wrote about the incident, and as I, processed what happened to me, the strange thing that happened was, as the more I wrote about it and the more I talk about it, the less the emotion was there around it. Because the emotion came up again, I experienced it again, and then it faded away. So the emotions went away. Okay, the emotions were experienced when I brought up the memory again, and I understood what the memory emotions were, but then it slowly dissipated and went away because I realized that this was just a uh, mean and, to an extent, a cruel and an unnecessary act by another person. It was not my fault at all. There was nothing that I did which was wrong. Even smiling at him was not wrong. Okay. I was not sure what to do. So I smiled at him. That was not encouragement. It was just uncertainty. All right. So the processing of this allowed the hidden thoughts to come up and allowed me to understand that I was an innocent child. Nothing, I did not do anything wrong. This person has done something very wrong in coming and trying to touch and follow and stalk a young girl. So sometimes, as I said, talking, writing, reflecting on it, maybe praying about it, maybe counseling, whatever it is, this allows the thoughts and attitudes to come up. Some of those attitudes may not be right. Okay, so for instance, if I had, we come to that, sometimes our attitude is one, sometimes, and sometimes our attitude can uh, cause the memory to linger on. If I, for instance, had thought that, oh God, I did something wrong, it was my fault, maybe I should have done this or done that, whatever. If I had complicated and unnecessary thoughts about that incident, the trauma may have lingered. Okay, so it's important for us to figure out what we're thinking about that and to process it, to analyze the thoughts, to analyze the emotions, and to do it with ourselves or with some sensible person to help us. And we need to reflect on what happened. We need to gain insights from it, right? Now, for instance, I learned that that sexual harassment can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter what clothes you wear. It doesn't matter where you are. For instance, I was a schoolgirl wearing a schoolgirl's costume. These were not what are called sexy clothes. I was not alone in a dark place. I was not drunk. I was not any of those things. It can happen anywhere. So blaming a person for what they wore or what they did or who they were with or whether they were alone or whatever, which is often the thing that is done, is all unnecessary. It's all wrong, right? So we have to understand things and get insights and mature and progress from what we have undergone and suffered through. Okay, so that is how when we get the right attitudes to the trauma that has happened, to the loss that has happened, to the mistake we have made, then we can get equal, a sense of serenity, a sense of peace, a sense of agency about it. Otherwise, we will always feel that there is something wrong. The wrong attitude can linger on. And of course, ideally, it should reach the point where we are able to forgive, where we are able to understand and come to a point where we let go. Okay. For instance, I do not have any feeling in my mind about that person. That person was obviously a fairly sick individual, right? Who would otherwise go and touch and harass a young child? That's not the right thing to do. So that person has a problem. But it's not my problem. It is that person's problem, and I can let them go. They have to do it. They have to fix their own problem. Hopefully, he has fixed his problem, but I'm not going to hold that burden over him. So we have to reach that point. If it is a loss, we have to accept the loss, integrate that loss into our lives, and then carry on with a new vision, a new hope. That, okay, I have had this loss. I have had this huge problem in my life. Yes, there has been this huge problem in my workplace. Yes, these things have happened, but it's okay. I have learned from it. I have grown. Okay. And I believe that that will help me to, in the future, bring a positive and better and more hopeful spin to whatever new situation I am in. So that's how we need to slowly, over the years, heal from the traumas, from the mistakes, from the problems that we have gone through. Okay. I would like to point out some corrections in the thoughts. I told the thoughts and the feelings that we have, we understand the feelings that we are going through, and we try to understand the attitudes we have, because attitudes need correction more than anything else. So, for instance, if we have gone through any big trauma, somebody has done something really bad to us, somebody has, made us suffer, somebody has used us, taken advantage of us, how do we correct these questions? The thing that often comes in our mind is why? Why has this happened? Why didn't this person come to my aid? Why didn't God come to my aid? So these questions of why we have to deal with. Now, there may be no fixed answer to that. Okay. We cannot always answer, and we should not even attempt to answer that question for someone else as to why it happened. But over time, if it has happened to us, we may come to understand that bad things happen. That's how life is. Bad things do happen. Everyone is not always around to save us. Sometimes things happen. Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's someone else. There is violence, there is war, there is abuse, there is loss. These things are there in life. There is betrayal, there is, cheating. All these things happen. Sometimes there is the guilt to deal with, and that's a big thing. We can blame ourselves that I should not have bought this house. Sometimes I keep thinking of those buildings which have been knocked down by the BBMP, or the buildings which collapsed when it's built near the river. There are these pictures nowadays during the floods, of one house which just collapses. And can you think of the trauma that the people who own those houses have gone through? All their things are lost. All the money sunk into the flat is lost. Perhaps lives are lost. And how do you deal with the guilt of that? First of all, it's an act of God, and things have happened, a flood, this, that, and you've lost everything on top of it. And do we start thinking, oh, I shouldn't have made that mistake? The guilt of it. I shouldn't have bought that house. That was a shady business. It was not a good flat. Why did I take that house? So the guilt, dealing with guilt is something which can last for a long time. And we need to come to that. Okay, we need to be able to accept that, yes, I made a mistake. We'll come to that in the next thing. The blame for a lot of trauma which is inflicted on us should be put in the right place, which is on the perpetrator. Okay, the guy who came and tried to touch me, he is to blame. Nobody else. I'm not to blame. A rapist is to blame. No one else is to blame. Not the girl, not where she was, not what time she was out at night. Nothing. The person who does the violence is to blame. Did somebody hit you? Whatever you said, whatever the provocation was, the person who hits is the person who's responsible for the violence. So letting go of that blame and anger, after putting the blame and anger on the perpetrator and not on yourself, but at some point you have to let that blame and anger go. Otherwise, that painful memory will always be there. This happened to me, this person did that to me. And that anger, the resentment will always be there. At some point, it can't be in 5 minutes. Okay, you can't heal in 5 minutes. But your goal at some point has to be to let go of the blame, to let go of the anger, to move from being a victim. You were a victim perhaps of sexual harassment, of rape, of loss, of whatever. But now you've moved to being a survivor. That I've come through this and I'm fine. I've come through this and I've let it go. I've come through this and I'm coming out of it, and I will be positive and happy. And I will build up my life again. And finally, moving to being an advocate for good, happy living, an advocate perhaps against the kind of trauma that you went through, perhaps an advocate to help others who are going through the same thing. So moving there, that course correction you have to do to help others who've gone through family problems, who have gone through a divorce. The divorce itself can be so painful, right? Why did this person do this to me? Why are they harassing me? Why are they going on, bleeding me for money? Why are they harassing me by not letting it complete? Yes, it can be painful, but you have to move from being that victim to being a survivor, and then moving on to becoming an advocate, helping others in that same situation. Now, suppose it was a mistake that you made. Again, there's a lot of change that has to happen in our thoughts. There's no point in going on regretting, just feeling bad, crying, and blaming yourself, or tucking it away in your subconscious and not letting it come out. That I made this huge mistake. I used to beat my wife. Okay? Perhaps you did. Accept that you didn't know. Perhaps you didn't know that it was right or wrong. Perhaps you knew and you did it anyway. But whatever it is, now you have to move on. You have to forgive yourself for those mistakes. Okay? You have to be kind to yourself. And concentrate on getting back up. Concentrate on now building your life again. Yes, the mistake was made. But now concentrate not on the fact that you made the mistake, but on how you can rectify the mistake and carry on with your life. Get back on track. That has to be your focus. Not the fact that I made this mistake, I'm a lousy person, I don't deserve to live, or just pushing it away and hiding that part of your life. Don't hide it. Try and be open and able to talk about it. Not to everybody, not inappropriately, but to some people at least. And then learn from your mistakes and celebrate life. That means don't stop doing things because you made that mistake. Don't feel that, okay, I've gone through a divorce and it was a messy divorce and perhaps I made a lot of mistakes in the divorce, so it's better I don't get married again. It's better I don't think of a relationship again. I am not made for relationships. I always had mess ups, breakups. No, celebrate life. Celebrate the fact that, yes, I have learned from my mistakes. I made mistakes, but I've learned what mistakes I've made. I'm going to avoid them, and I'm going to be a kinder person. I'm going to be kind to myself and to others. And I'm going to keep taking the risk of living life. Okay, so those are the course corrections which need to be made if you want to recover from those mistakes. Okay, now I've got this slide up, which I would like you all to comment about, right? Look at this slide and tell me, this girl has gone through a certain trauma. Now tell me, what mistake is this girl making? Can you put it in the chat? This is a letter from a child who attempted to kill herself. And this is what she wrote, right? I did not tell you in the first place because I was so scared and ashamed of this thing. If it was any other problem in my life, I would not try to kill myself. But this matter is the one I could not even handle. The thing is that she puts his name. He's the one behind this. He has been sexually harassing me since 2 months. He kept on touching me, whatever, and she goes on. So this child is what is the mistake that this child is making? She's got a painful memory and she finds that it is so bad that she doesn't want to live. What is the mistake that she is making? What is the misplaced guilt? Okay, Angel. Any other comments?
Any other response, friends? Please put it on the chat. Let's make it
Of
interactive.
fear that no one would understand. Yes, Elizabeth. Should have confided in someone so as to deal with it herself. Yeah, she did not feel she could confide in anyone, keeping silent, okay? Blaming herself. Shame, yes. She should not feel herself responsible. Emotional pain won't go away. Okay. All right. So we've covered, I think you all have mentioned most of it. Okay. So this child has blamed herself for something which is totally not her fault, right? Somebody is sexually harassing her and she is feeling that she is guilty. She's feeling ashamed. She's feeling scared. She's feeling nobody else will understand. She's feeling that the only recourse, the only way of dealing with this is to kill myself because it is so shaming, so scary, so, such a thing that I cannot talk about. She's hiding it away and she finally tries to kill herself. So you see that this memory has got a lot of misplaced and wrong emotions about it. If she had been able to talk about it with someone, process those emotions, process the thoughts, perhaps her life would have been different. So I want to just close with this reminder to us, okay? A lot of our memories are because of things that have happened to us. Somebody who was unkind to us, somebody who did something to us which was not fair, some relationship or some abuse or something like that, some trauma, that could be the reason. It could be the mistakes that we have made, either inadvertent mistakes or else just incidental, sometimes because of poor choices, sometimes because of deliberate mistakes that we may have made. That can cause a lot of painful memories. Sometimes it is loss of a person, loss of a pet, perhaps, loss of our dreams and hopes. All these things can cause painful memories. Sometimes it is the circumstances of pain, whether in our family, whether in our children, in our workplaces, in our churches, all these things can cause us pain. Now, we need to remember that in order to heal from this, we have to spend time in bringing out those emotions, bringing out those attitudes and processing them, talking about them. No need to hide them away. To understand the wrong thoughts and emotions which are conspiring to keep the pain going. All right? By not being acknowledged, by not being talked about, by not being dealt with. Deal with it by writing, talking, praying, maybe sometimes some people like to draw, paint, or write songs about it, or talk to a counselor about it in whatever way. Bring it out, express it, and then process it, understand it, and then correct it wherever the thoughts are wrong, wherever the thoughts are something to learn from. When it's trauma, deal with the wrong questions of why and how and all those things, the guilt and all those whatever is wrong there. Put the blame in the right place, but then move on from that to letting the blame go, letting the anger go, At some point, that has to happen if you have to heal. And if it is memories of mistakes, then remember this, that yes, you have made the mistake. But now concentrate on rectifying your life. Okay, don't concentrate on the mistake. The mistake is done. Be kind to yourself, forgive yourself, and celebrate life now. Okay, let it go and celebrate life. Don't be afraid to take the same, chances again. Don't be afraid to learn from it and start again. Okay, so this is what I wanted to share. And now I leave the time back to you, Abhijit, if there are
Yeah,
questions or
thank you.
comments. Yeah.
Uh, can you stop the screen share? Okay, great. Yeah. All right, friends. Now we are going to the second section of today's thing. We'll have a Q&A